So, hello and welcome back to my C++ tutorial playlist. This video I want to do something more practical and write a CSV parser. And for that we first need to come up with an interface. And I thought that we would do two separate classes. One is a file handler that handles the file access, and the other one would be the CSV parser that would only be concerned with the parsing and not with the file access. What we want to have is an explicit constructor, so we want to explicitly create this class and don't allow for implicit type conversions. And it should take in a file name, and also it should take in an open mode, so if we want to write to it or read from it or append from it or something like that. When we don't specify it, it should be defaulted to an input file. And we also want to specify a destructor where we would then, once we have acquired a file handle, we would close it here again. Let's include all the things we need. So another consideration is what happens if we copy or assign our file handler to another file handler. And for simplicity, I just want to delete those, so this is not possible. Also, the same applies not only for copying, but also moving. I don't want to be concerned with that. This is only for simplicity, of course, and to make sure our library, if we can call it so, doesn't get used in a way it's not intended. So I'm deleting all of these operations. Like so. So whenever we try to construct a file handler with a reference from another file handler, we don't want to allow that. Then when another file handler is assigned to us, we don't want to allow that either. And the same applies here. These are just when the file handler on the other side is an R value, which basically means that it can't be assigned to, so it's not important if we keep it or not. So this basically means just that the type other could be destroyed and we don't really care. Very simplified, of course, but that's basically it. Then, once we have this out of the way, we need to specify a way to access the file stream. Like so. So we can read or write from it. Then we also need to have a way to check if the file is open or not. And let's also annotate that with const, because we don't want to modify this class by calling this open. Then this whole class should just be a wrapper around ifstream. And let's call this m_file stream, like so. And for our CSV parser, it should be relatively simple. We also want to have an explicit constructor. Basically, the idea behind all of this boilerplate, so to speak, is to make our class really, really hard to use in a wrong way. So anything you can think of, how a user might misuse our class or how a user might use our class in a wrong way, we want to disallow that or handle these cases properly. And now our CSV parser, I think it should take in a file handler reference, like so, and also a delimiter, which is usually a comma in basically all CSV files, because CSV stands for comma separated, but it's nice to let the user adjust this if needed. For simplicity, we also just want to have a public vector of vectors of strings, like so. Maybe let's don't make this implicit to have a nicer API for our CSV parser. Then this should be the return type of our parse function. And this should just give us basically all the lines. This represents all the tokens in a line. And then the string represents the token that has been parsed. So what's wrong here? Oh, we only need 2. And of course we need to put this, and let's make this public again. And then what we need to store in our class is string, maybe for a file name, or we can store the file handler. And to make it simple, we just create a copy of the file handler here. And also we want to store the delimiter like so. Now we can already start with implementing all of these. And for that, we want to copy all of these again. Then we need to include our declarations and then annotate everything that belongs to file handler with file handler. Now the same thing for our CSV parser. We can annotate anything that belongs to our CSV parser with CSV parser. So that's only these two methods. You can remove all of that. So I just realized that we need to have these to handle our file handler. I will mark this as explicit again, but instead take in here an std string with the file name. And we need to adjust it here as well. And with that, we can start to implement all of these. So let's start here. And the delimiter will just be the delimiter that has been passed in. And I'd like to use these brackets like so. Then let's start with this file handler. And as we can see here, we have an IF stream here. So we need to initialize that. Maybe we should do some error handling. And we will just throw a runtime exception that the file can't be opened. So we don't do anything else when the file can't be opened. So here in the destructor, that gets automatically called whenever our file handler goes out of scope. So at the end of its lifetime. So we will also not file stream open, we do an early return. And otherwise, if the file stream is open, let's state this explicitly, we will close the file stream like so. Then in the case where we get the stream, we only need to return our internal stream we have saved anyways. Here it's also very simple. We just need to return if our internal stream is open and return that. Then we basically have covered the constructor here for our CSV parser. So that's everything we need to do here. So we can get right into the interesting part of the parser, which is the actual parsing. And let's create a reference to the file stream and call it file. And this is just the file handler. And here we want to get the stream, not file system, IF stream. Then we want to have a result of our return type, and let's call this data. Then we need to have a variable where we save our line in that we read, and then we can iterate over the file stream, and we can use getLine from the standard library, and we specify our file stream here and where it should save the line. So it should already work like this. Then we need to have this internal row type. Okay, let's do something here to make it a little bit simpler. Let's say using row underscore t equals to this. And we will just have a vector of rows like so to make it a little bit more readable. Create a row. And there's also a very useful class called string-stream, where we could also iterate over the same way as we did before with our file stream, but now we just iterate over our string stream, and then we need to save our result somewhere, and also now we need to specify our little delimiter. So of course our token is of type string, so we need to create a variable where you can save it into also. then we can row push back our token. After we are done with that line, we then have a row with all of the tokens in it. Then we need to append this to our data. So push back our row. And then we finally need to return all the data that we've parsed. And that's already it for our parser. Now we need to include this also into our CMake lists. And to make some especially older IDEs happy, we include the HPP here also, like that. And with that, we can already delete everything we did last time and include our CSV-Parser. And then remember, we did throw an exception when we are not able to open a file. So we need to enclose all of our code in a try block. And if anything unexpected happened, we want to catch it. And of course, this needs to be const and not catch. Then we want to print it out to the screen. And I will use the error stream for that. And with what we get a description, like so. With that, we would have our error handling. Now we are able to create a new CSV-Parser. So with that, we can specify our file name. So let's call that data.csv. And then we can get our data from parser.parse. Now we can display all of our parsed things. Call this row. And let's do std print. And then our token. And then after each line, we want to print a new line. And now we can test if our exception is working. So let's build our program here. And as we can see, we get an error, failed to open file, data CSV, as we want to have it. This is because we triggered this exception here, and we have caught it properly and went into here and got this error description, which is what we wanted. So now let's create data.csv in the build directory and have some data in here. So this might be name, city, for example. Of course, we could use Excel to create some CSV file, but I will just write it by hand for now. So Alice is 30 and lives in New York, for example. So like this. Now if we go into build, so in the same directory as our hello and our data CSV lies, and we can execute it again, and we can see that we were able to read our data in. And with that, we have built a very simple CSV parser. One thing I want to note is here in the scope, our parser exists. And once it goes out of scope again, then all of the data will be automatically cleaned up. So our parser will call its destructor and the destructor of all its members. And then also our file handler gets properly handled and everything will be clean and tidy. So yeah, thank you for watching and see you next time.